to say no is to affirm the other things that you're doing that matter to the person you're saying no to.
What's going on, Next Gen fam? Welcome back to Mentor Momentum with Next Gen HQ. We got another incredible week, another incredible guest for you. She is an unstoppable force in both brand marketing and social impact. Previously, she served as the VP of Brand and Design at Avant and was the head of brand strategy at Twitter. She's now the Chief Experience Officer at Cars.com, while also serving on the boards of She 100, Housing Opportunities for Women, and Cubs Charities. We have so much to talk into, and I want to get right into it. So, Brooke, welcome to Mentor Momentum. Thank you for joining us. It is our pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to be here with you.
Brooke, I want to start right in the beginning of your career and really dive back and then take us through together. When you're looking back now at your career, when you're coming out of school, 20-year-old Brooke, what is maybe one piece of advice that you would give to that version of yourself?
Yeah. So I started working when I was 19, and I worked on alcohol and tobacco clients. So there were, some conversations involved where I didn't necessarily have the ID to show up, but so I wouldn't give myself any advice about that. That all went okay. I think the thing that I would have said, that I wish I had learned earlier that I would have said to myself is it's okay to say no. Now I think couch that in, I totally believe what my grandfather said to me, which is all work is cumulative, right? And so I think it's my tendency at that age and for most of my career has been just to go at any opportunity that's thrown my way. Just go at it, gain the experience, understand what I can learn from it. But what it took me a long time to learn after a significant period of burnout was that actually saying no to one thing is saying yes to another, right? So thinking really strategically about what I'm saying yes to and what I'm saying no to. One of my mentors likes to say that she waits for things that are a full body yes, right? So what are the things that you really feel like you want to lean into, that you really feel like you want to do, and that it's okay to say no to the things that you don't feel that way about. That took me a long time to learn.
Absolutely. And I think you're speaking to an audience that needs to learn that more than anybody. You're talking to next generation entrepreneurs who want to say yes to everything, trying to build. Is there a turning point in your career where you remember saying no for the first time and having it feel really impactful or powerful?
Yeah, totally. I remember I can see the context and everything. I was in a position at an agency. I was working really hard. I had an awesome role. We were pitching tons of new business. And it was the same thing. I was saying yes to everything because I wanted the experience. And I was getting strung out. I was exhausted. It was 3 or 4 in the morning. I was working on a deck. The deck wasn't where I wanted it to be. It wasn't where anybody wanted it to be. And I had this sort of aha moment where I was like, nobody's going to tell you to stop unless you tell you to stop, right? No one's going to manage your career for you. And oh, by the way, you don't have to be doing all of these things, not because you're so awesome, but because you're not you're not the Messiah, right? I was taking everything on myself, not because I thought I was the Messiah, but I was taking everything on myself because I thought I could learn, I thought I could contribute, and I could, but I was doing it to my own detriment, right? And so that was when I showed up the next day and I said, listen, I've got to shift things because I'm crumbling under the weight of this assignment. And that's when my mentor at the time looked at me and said, he taught me that lesson that saying no to something is actually saying yes to another, right? So he taught me it's okay to say, you know what, I can't help you here because I need to prioritize this other thing, which happens to be very important to you too, right? So that's a really effective way to say no, is to affirm the other things that you're doing that matter to the person you're saying no to.
Absolutely. I'm there with you. I have those memories of first job being 2 in the morning, still working on that board presentation and being man, this is tough. So I'm there with you. I think it's such an impactful lesson to be able to realize that saying no also opens another door to say yes. I think a lot of people forget that and feel like the no is just a door closed versus actually opening something else up.
Right. Totally.
I want to talk a bit about entrepreneurship for a little bit. And I know you talk about what it's like to be on what you call the implosion team. Can you share a bit about that with us and, what kind of your thesis is when it comes to innovating within a larger ecosystem and really having that entrepreneur mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. So I never imagined I would be in a corporate leader, let alone like a leader of a public company. I thought I was going to make documentary films and travel the world. And I studied politics and art history. And I found myself in this really amazing position over and over, actually being fairly successful within the corporate world. And, one of the things that's really important to me is to contribute to and advocate for a culture that represents me as a queer woman, that represents lots and lots of different voices. I tell my teams all the time that prisms make rainbows, right? The more perspectives you put on the problem, the brighter and bolder the solutions get. And so being on the implosion team means challenging status quos that don't necessarily work for everybody, challenging status quos that don't represent different voices, and challenging really, and this could be in culture or even in just solving a business problem. It's like, why are we doing these things this way? Have we thought about other ways to do things? Have we thought, implosion, like someone told me a long time ago that I needed to stop saying that I like to blow shit up. And I haven't stopped saying it because I say it in a very creative way, right? Like I like to understand the things that aren't working and implode them or break them down so that we can create new things that work better, right? And a lot of times that means building from what's already there, and especially, entrepreneurship, which is, I love that word. In that context, right? You're looking at sort of the circumstances and how are we doing? And then you're understanding where the pain points are, and then you're solving for those pain points, right? And so you're creating progress within a system, which can be really, really powerful. It's evolutionary revolution, and it can be really, really meaningful. Yeah.
Do you have like a key story of like a time that you've like blown shit up? We're allowed to curse on the podcast. I'll throw it out there first, but and like what that experience was like, because as I'm hearing it now, I'm like, depending on where you're at in the org, I think that could be very scary to like the senior leadership team to be like, okay, hey, we're going to blow something up here to like actually create major change and do it in a positive way. Is there like a story or an insight you remember from like kind of one of the first times that you blew shit up and really started changing the game?
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds really violent, but it's actually not in practice, right? So the first woman that I worked with, she was such a master at like she could just look around a room and ask questions. And through asking questions, she brought everybody onto her side, right? So she knew how to and I tend to have foot and mouth disease. I sort of like say whatever I think, whenever I think it. But this is something that I've been trying to practice for 20 years from learning this from one of the first people that I worked with. And so I think a lot of times it looks like that, right? A lot of times it looks like asking really incisive questions, right? Understanding sort of what are the challenges and challenging people, not in a confrontational way, in a direct way, but not necessarily in a confrontational way that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. Another mentor of mine used to say that you can say anything to anyone as long as you say it in a way that they can hear you, right? So it's thinking about what matters to them and then framing a question in terms of, okay, well, how can we think about this differently? Or I hear you saying this and you saying this. Let's talk about like how those two things come together. So I think a lot of the art of implosion, right, is really being a listener and really, so it's actually very pacifist things. Like it's not a violent art, right? It might be a dark art, but it's really listening. It's really understanding. It's having a lot of empathy, coming in, and then recognizing also that a well-framed question or a well-framed problem is half solved. Right. So like for me, it's as important to show up with the awesome questions as it is to have the answers. In fact, at this point in my career, it's way less important for me to have the answers because I actually want the teams around me coming up with the answers because more buy-in that way and, better results that way. But having those questions and thinking really strategically about that's what matters.
Yeah, it's I'm reminded so much of something that happened with us at NextGen recently where, all of a sudden there's this team that we're working on. It's not revving where it needs to be. I come in, I'm like, all right, I have ideas on how I want to change everything. But I was like, that's aggressive. Like, I don't want to just be like, all right, guys, we're going to. So I literally came in. I was like, all right, I want everyone else to tell me like what the problems are here. I didn't even realize what I was doing. I was just like, that feels like maybe like a nice thing to like offer people. But I think because of that, we were able to really get to the root of things. And me coming in from an outside perspective, I don't know anything other than what I think I know. So it was such a powerful, to your point, like it is a pacifist way of doing things. Like you're giving people what they need, but you're also able to still achieve the goal of like completely breaking things down and like exploding them to then rebuild incredible systems.
Yeah. And best case scenario is like you walk out and the thing that you wanted to affect is somebody else's idea, right? Because that that they're going to advocate. They're on your team, So I think that's the other thing is like letting go of the pride of authorship, and just recognizing that if the agenda is progress, let's get there, whatever it takes.
Absolutely. I want to talk about data for a second. I mean, you're known, you use the acronym DREAM. Data rules everything around me. I love it. How are you using data, and how has it informed you throughout your career and in your current role right now at Cars?
Yeah, so I would say just as digital, it has gotten progressively more important throughout my career. I started my career as a strategic planner, really understanding, I would say more psychographic and qualitative understanding of sort of what makes people tick, and then using that understanding to convince people to buy things, right, or do things that we. And that practice and the practice of marketing and the practice of product has gotten so much more powerful because of all of the data signals that surround us, right? Mm-hmm. So I leverage data every day, and I'm always looking for how can we use data to help us solve problems in more brilliant ways. So I think, part of that has to do with all of the creepy stuff about the internet, right? Like we follow you and understand what you're doing. But the advantage of that to you, there's a quid pro quo there, right? The advantage of that to you is I'm only sending you messages that actually matter to you, assuming that you're moving around the internet in an authentic way. And so I can't help you if you're not moving around. But so I think, we're looking at data every turn, whether it's analyzing the impact of what we're doing, whether it's formulating messages, right? Understanding what's going to matter to people, or really understanding what's at the root of problems. Because, especially on the product side, like sometimes people will, it's the old Henry Ford story, right? Like he said, if we asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster carriage. People are really adept at articulating their problems, and it's our job to come up with the solutions, right? And now we don't do that in a vacuum either, right? We're talking to them about the solutions along the way, but data, both in the big data and small data sense, is a critical piece to everything that we do at every turn. So
yeah. It's fascinating to me. We were just having this conversation yesterday. I work on a lot of the data here, and it was funny. I was talking with our co-CEO. And I was like, hey, man, the data's saying this. And he's like, yeah, I could have guessed that. Like just knowing what I know. So finding that trade-off between all right, the actual data and the numbers themselves versus just the gut feelings you have from being in this space. I'm sure that's a trade-off that you're making constantly.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think it's great to get lost in data, and data is a really powerful tool. And I think we always have to take a step back and ask a couple questions like, is it reasonable, right? Does it reflect my own experience? And if it doesn't, then either I need to update my experience or there's something wonky in the data, right? And either can be true. So it's kind of a trust but verify thing, because data has insights, but data can have insights. It often doesn't have answers, right? It's not going to answer the question.
Brooke, what would you say are your insights and tips for leading your team? Obviously, talking to an audience that could be first-time managers and thinking about how they are using everything that we've talked about today, whether it's data to lead the team, implosion to lead the team. What are you doing kind of in your team to keep everybody motivated and really push people towards that North Star that you're setting?
Yeah, I think, don't underestimate the importance of over communicating and communicating again, that vision, right? And that strategy, right? I've liked communications teams. And if there's one thing that I know about communications is it's never good enough and it's never enough, right? So coming back to that strategy and that vision in every single conversation that you're having in big ways and small ways, and making sure that people understand not just their role in it, right? So how are your KPIs going to contribute to our overall KPIs? But again, reiterating the fact that they play a critical role in it, that without this role that we won't get there, right? Yeah. And then just really making sure that they understand. Time and time again, I think I've been surprised at how I think I've communicated something really clearly, a strategy or a vision or whatever, and it comes back that people have different perspectives on it. And so I think over communicating that is really, really important. I think, making sure that everyone feels empowered to do their job. I always say my job is to block down field, and use my sharp elbows to get things out of your way, and then hold the net so that you can leap, right? Because hopefully you leap and the net will find you, but I also want to be there, with that net support you. And then the last thing is, I think, the further along you get in your career, I think the more assumptive we get about the basics, right? And so that's like doing your homework, understanding your customer, getting, listening to the earnings calls. We had one today, right? There are some just sort of fundamental things about business that, I think we can get cocky about, sort of feeling like we understand everything, and we do get better at those things, right? But I think always coming back to the fundamentals, and always, showing up with clear eyes, full heart, and an open mind makes a big difference every day.
Absolutely. Totally off record. Friday Night Lights fan?
I never watched it, but I just love it.
I got this thing. I was like,
it's just so good.
I love the way you put the importance of over communication. And it's so true, whether it's personal, professional, you say one thing, the other person on the other end could hear something completely different just based on their own heuristics and the way they're operating. So being able to over communicate and then trust that your people are going to get stuff done. I got to ask, along your journey, whether in leadership or in anything you're doing, is there perhaps a mistake or a failure you made and a lesson that you learned from it so that our people can avoid that same trap?
Yeah, I think, I'll just talk personally. Like, I wish I had learned how to negotiate earlier. I wish I had, at one point in my career, I took a role that turned out to be like super cumulative, and I'm glad that I did it. But I took a role where the title wasn't where I knew I should be. And it was good experience, but I spent a lot of time at that job kind of resentful about not having the title and not having negotiated for what I really thought I was worth. And so I don't regret taking that job, but I do regret all the time I spent kind of stewing about it. And I think if I had pushed a little harder, there's an amazing book called Women Don't Ask. And it is a good book for men and women, but particularly for your women listeners. It's just all about it's all about negotiation. And I wish I had read it a lot earlier. I think, it's just, comp and package and title, right? They matter because they're sort of like how you feel valued, right? And obviously, like, there's a lot of satisfying things about a job, and you want to be solving problems and having influence and contributing to strategy, all of those things. And it's really important that you feel valued, right? And so I think recognizing that, and getting a clear sense of your own value and advocating for yourself, right? I think that's a really important piece that especially hard charging, type A go-getters can sometimes overlook, because the opportunities are so exciting,
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think so insightful to everyone listening that's kind of like, oh, I'm early, it's my first job, I shouldn't, necessarily argue for what I think my worth is. But it seems like that can also just cause perpetual patterns of being like, oh, okay, it's a good job, like I'll just kind of be satisfied, versus maximizing, what is kind of the value. And being able to share those resources, that book, which we'll make sure is in the comments for people to check out as well. Just such incredible value for everyone to be able to get from you.
Yeah, I mean, worst thing they can say is no, right? And so, okay. But I think, you start to see it show up in the data, especially men versus women, right, in salary and comp. So it is worth having the conversation, and nobody's gonna ding you for having the conversation. And if they do, that's their problem.
Absolutely. I want to talk for a moment about your charity nonprofit involvement that you have, which is so incredible. And I don't know how you're balancing all of the things that you're doing. So we'll have to talk about some life habits right after this and how you're able to stay at the top of your game. But talking on this thread for a second, what is your advice to the next generation? People that obviously care so much about causes and want to have a social impact. How can they get involved early? How can they balance, and how can they ultimately scale up to serve on boards and be able to really affect change in a way that I think everybody wants to in this, kind of up and coming generation?
Yeah, I love that. I love that this generation is so focused there. I think it's a really important piece to me. Advocating for within and for my community really matters to me, and it's like sort of like doing well and doing good, right? And ultimately, I think we all want those things to converge. At least I do. So for me, the way that I've looked at board opportunities and kind of giving back opportunities, I think first and foremost, like, is this a group of people that I want to be with? Because you do spend a lot of time. And I think it's an opportunity to learn from other people. So that's the other thing. Like, it's a group of people that I can learn from, right? Whether that's life lessons or professional lessons or even business connections, right? There are a lot of, I have, had business opportunities come from the giving back work that I've done. But I think, first and foremost, it's about, does this really matter to me? Like, is this part of the change that I want to see in the world? And if it's not on your personal agenda, here's another thing, like, there is so much good to be done, and there are so many opportunities to give and give back. But I would say, like, try to focus on something that really matters to you personally, because that's how you're going to show up most fully. And there, again, like many boards and many organizations that would be happy to have your help, but like, spend some time getting to know some organizations as opposed to just saying yes to the first one that comes your way.
Yeah, it's like, when I asked this question, I was like, that was way more insightful than I expected it to be. I feel like that's the wrong phrasing I'm trying to get at here. But like, to me, when I'm hearing it, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, there are so many other opportunities that could come from doing this incredible work, but having it truly aligned so that you can take value of those opportunities, not just trying to, and I don't think a lot of people do this, but like almost check the box and be like, all right, yeah, I'm helping out, doing my part. But really, the impact it can have both personally and professionally seems so much more profound than, is maybe more than meets the eye when you're looking at it on its surface.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, She 100, we started because my friend Angela and I were on the board of GLAAD in Chicago, and we were the only women. And we were like, this is bullshit. Every event that we go to, it's all gay white men, and we love them dearly, but this isn't representing us. And so we wanted to figure out a way to bring more queer women into giving and philanthropy. And so we started our own thing, right? So that's another opportunity that's for sure out there. And that one, that was really about a passion point for me. It mattered to me. It was my community. And we were able to create some impact. So.
Absolutely. Brooke, I said I was going to have to ask you about life habits and how you're able to perform at such a high level with like 18 different roles and titles while also having your own personal life. What are you doing in your day-to-day, whether it's a morning routine, other habits that are allowing you to be your best self? Yeah,
that's an emergent topic, always changing. I also have toddlers, so it's everything's changing on a day-to-day basis around here. I started running marathons in 2011, and running, I was not a runner. I hated running. I thought it was stupid. I couldn't get it. And then I went out to cheer for a friend, and I was just blown away by the humanness of the whole experience, right? All of these people going so hard after a seemingly unachievable goal, and then all these strangers coming out to cheer them on. I was really inspired. So running is something that definitely centers me. Walking too. Now I walk and listen to podcasts and listen to books from people that I admire, and that's a way that I reset. And then this, through coronavirus, I started meditating, and that has actually been transformational. And some days I do it for 5 minutes, and some days I do it for 20 minutes. But there's definitely a difference in me on the days that I meditate and the days that I don't. And if you ask my assistant, she would probably tell you that she could point out those days. But that's been a really, it's not like I watched the movie Soul with my kids, and how I don't know if there's like the guy who reaches the other reality. And I was talking to somebody about meditation. I'm like, yeah, when do you get that? Like, not the point, right? Like, you can't overachieve at meditation. You can't be a competitive meditator. But it really has just it's taken the edge off in a lot of ways. And it's brought me to some clarity that I really value. And it's something that I look forward to.
I love that. Brooke, you're my new best friend. Like, we'll talk more offline. We got lots of stuff to dialogue, but so insightful on the meditation side. I always hear it's like, all right, the only way you're failing is if you're trying too hard. Like, the less you try, the better you are at it, which is like so hard, because I'm right there with you, training for marathons too myself. I'm like, finding that balance is like between the competitive side and the like, okay, I'm not supposed to give effort, is definitely a challenge. But I think what's so cool hearing from you is that a lot of the misconceptions around meditation and centering yourself is that, oh, I'm more competitive, that's too slowing down, like that's not for me. But at the same time, you can have that, personality, that go-getter desire, and this can still be a valuable tool.
It absolutely adds to it, because for me, it creates focus, and it helps me get out of my own way, honestly. So anyway, it's been really valuable for me.
Brooke, we've somehow made it close to the end of our time here. I don't know how time flew by, but before we any last pieces of advice, words of wisdom, tips for the next generation of entrepreneurs coming up, building new things, what would you tell the entire audience that you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like stay fearless, right? I was on a panel once with this amazing woman named Sadira who said, "Protect your magic and defend your dopeness," right? And I love that because I love, like, first of all, that means get to know your magic, right? Understand what about you is so special and what your superpowers are, right? And bring those to the table, but also look for opportunities that can leverage those superpowers, right? And then stay focused on what's going to ground you, what's going to excite you, what's going to light you up, because that's absolutely how you're going to have the biggest impact in whatever you're doing.
Brooke, thank you so much for everything you've shared. Thank you for joining us here on Mentor Momentum with NextGen HQ. Thank you. It was great. It was a great conversation. Nice to know you.
That was Mentor Momentum, sharing life and business lessons from incredible leaders. Looking for more momentum? Subscribe to our weekly Momentum newsletter at nextgenhq.com and check out our other podcast, Momentum Audio, on any of your favorite podcast channels. Now that's momentum.